To assemble this carrier, and you want to get yourself stone and some WD-40, and you're going to rub that down on both surfaces here just to make sure they're both true, and then put your gear on there. You should be able to set it on and start your bolts from the bottom, and once you get them all lined up and started, then you should be able to torque that down by hand. Sometimes you might have to heat the gear a little bit if there's too much of an interference fit here to make it go down. And then, so if those are 3/8 bolts, they should be at about 55 foot-pounds. We're going to assemble the carrier same as the old one. This is our new pinion, old pinion. We've ground out the bearing so it'll slip on and off by hand. We got our yoke, so it'll go on and off by hand. And we've also massaged the nut here so that it'll go on and off by hand, because we're going to have to be putting this in and taking it out a few times, most likely. Interesting is in our bearing kit, and I am using this one here. There's no shims to go underneath this bearing here, and I couldn't get the old bearing off, and since there's no shims for adjustment, I found it pointless to cut it off, so I just leave that on, press the new one on, and it looks like all our shimming is going to be done from the cup behind this bearing if there's any shims that need to be put in. When I removed this one, there was no shims, so we're going to start off with that, and we'll spin it around and see what we got for a contact pattern. Here, we notice that our gears, this one is the original one, it's sitting up higher than this one here. I measured from the bottom to the top on each, and that measurement is correct and equal, but there's a difference here between where the gear is bolted onto the flange, and I guess we'll find out when we put it together. We're going to use all the original shims and everything, but also too, the new pinion is larger too, so just a point of interest there. We got our carrier in there and bolted in, and we put some compound on here, and we spun it around to get a pattern. Another trick, I use this to pull it out, but I also use this to put some tension on there when you're spinning to get the contact pattern. So if we get in a little closer here, we see that this is the drive end of the tooth, and we're just barely touching the end there. So obviously the pinion needs to come out and contact the ring gear some more. So what I did was I kind of drew a little thing here to help explain. So that's the drive end of the tooth, that's our contact. On the toe is the closest to the center, and the heel is the outside circumference. And so basically that's barely touching the tooth, which means the pinion has to come into the ring gear, which means we have to add shims, and that all makes sense because when we compared our carriers, we noticed that the original carrier and ring were higher than this one. So we'll pull this out, and we'll pull out the pinion, and we'll put some shims in behind that cup, and we'll do it all over again. And we adjusted some shims, and we've got our pattern is pretty much where we want it in the center of the tooth on the coast and the drive side. And next is the backlash, and there is like no backlash in here. So next we got to adjust our backlash, and I think once we do that, we're gonna move that over this way a little more so that it'll be contacting more of the center of the tooth here. Shims that I put in there was I took the carrier and I put a straight edge on the end of the carrier here, and I measured from the end of the carrier to the bottom of the ring gear on both carriers, and then I got the difference. And the difference that I got between the old one and the new one was 179. Then what I did was I measured the height of the pinion from the new and the old one, and there was a difference there of 0.125. So then I subtracted the 125 from the 179, and I got 54 thou. So the shims provided in the kit here are just, they fit in behind the cup. So I mic'd them all, and I marked down what all of them are, and I got as close to my 54 thou as I could. I believe my number was 53 and a half. So that's the math that I used in this application. I don't go by whatever's on the end of the pinion. I can't make no sense of it, because we've got to adjust our shims from side to side. So because we have no backlash, that means that the ring gear is too far into the pinion. So we've got to open that up. So we've got to take some shims off of this side, and we've got to put it over here, and that's going to drive the pinion away, the ring gear away from the pinion, and that's going to get our backlash here. So I think we're going to start off with something like 10 thou and see where that gets us. We've adjusted our shims. We're checking the backlash here. Let's see if you can see that. And we've got 9 to 10 thou roughly on there, which is in spec. It's 6 to 10 thou, I think, for the backlash. And also too, we're pretty happy with the wear pattern, center of the tooth there. And if I move that out of the way, check the coast side. I'd like to probably see that more center of the tooth than what it is, but I think it's acceptable. So we'll go back to the bench and I'll show you the calculations there. We want to mic all of our shims here. I did mine in blue for these ones. I did red for the pinion, so you don't get anything mixed up. They are a different size, but so we want to see what we're working with. Clean all the shims, mark them for what they are. And our original ones that we had in there, we had 170 on the passenger side, and we had 152 on the drive side. We didn't have any backlash, so what I did was reduce that by 10 on the driver's side, add it over to the passenger side, and so you just make your selection of shims here and get your packs and then put them in. You don't see it here because they're installed, but basically what they do, these are the smaller shims, but they've got two thick ones, and one of them will have like a recess in there that these will fit in, these thin ones, so they'll fit in there so they don't distort when you're installing it. So yeah, you just grab your shims and mic them, add them up, put them together, and put it in. So now we're ready for the final assembly. What we'll do is we'll remove the carrier again, and we're going to remove the pinion. We're going to put our new bearing race in for the pinion there, and then we've got to reassemble it with the crush sleeve, and we got to get our preload on these bearings. Assembly here. We've installed the pinion with the new bearing cups and shims, and I'm using the old nut to drive it in. I have not put the oil seal in yet. I put that in last. We're setting the preload, so we have our inch-pound torque wrench here, and we've got it at 15 or 16, which is still within spec. And when we get the carrier back in, we're going to take this off. We're going to install the new the baffle in there, and the oil seal, and the new nut, because it's the lock nut there for the final assembly. And then we will check it again with the inch-pound torque wrench there. Make sure that it's still within spec, that we haven't tightened it too much. When you're tightening this down, once you get close, using a long bar, you just wanna go slow, and nice slow movements. Check it again, and keep doing that, because it doesn't take much to go past. Carrier, what I've decided to do is adjust our shims here by 3 thou. We're at 10 thou backlash. The setting is 6 to 10. The smallest shim I have is 3 thou, so I'm going to try and reduce that to get closer to 6. And that was what we end up with our final shim pack. I'd mentioned before, in the kit they have this step in there, so this is like 63 or 62 thou, and then they'll have another big one here at the end. And what you do is you put your thin shims inside where the step is, and that kind of holds that in place, and then your thick ones on the outside. Now I don't know if you can see it or if I just wiped it off, but there's little grits on there, and so we gotta re-wipe down each of the shims and stack them again, because those little bits, that'll throw it off. You know, that'll throw it off a couple thou or whatever, and that'll change our number. So final assembly, we're gonna wipe down all the shims again with some clean cloth, and just take your time and put it all back together, and then we'll give it a final check. We've got we're gonna check our backlash again, and that was after we adjusted the shim pack by 3 thou. So we've got about 8 thou. It brought it down from 10 to 8, and that's about as good as we're gonna get for the backlash. So we will tighten down our bearing caps, and then we'll go back to the pinion, remove the yoke, install the oil seal, and reinstall the yoke with the torquing it down to make sure that we get our proper torque here. Hopefully we get the same, about 15 inch-pounds. And then lastly, we'll be putting on the cap for the cover, and I'm going to be putting a drain plug in there. The idea being is we fill this up full of fluid, we run it in, and then just simply drain the fluid, put some new fluid in, just like breaking in an engine. We've pretty much maintained our contact pattern there. That didn't really change. It might have moved it more into the center a little bit, and it didn't really change the coast very much, but it's still, I think it's still good. Put our axles in, and then there's some C-clips to hold those in there, and a locking pin that you tighten the bolt on, complete the axle installation. And then we put the cap on here, and I had welded a plug in the bottom there so you could drain the fluid. And then around on the other side, we have installed the drive shaft and the oil seal here, When we put the yoke back on and we tightened up the nut there, you can check it again with the torque wrench for inch pounds. And our final reading was 20 inch pounds. Previous to that was 15. The reading's going to be higher now because we've got the carrier installed, and that's part of why that number is higher. So if you check it again and you find the number's higher, you think it's too high, it's because the carrier's in there causing a little more friction for when you're turning that around. Also, what you could also do is you could make a mark on your nut and then again on the yoke before you remove this, and then when you reinstall it after installing the oil seal, then that's going to get you back to where you were before too. So that is the job complete.